Many of us have long held this belief or believed the myth that the US and Britain, the two allies of the two world wars of the 20th century, are natural winners. They will somehow get everything right as they have their economy and their defenses. Nothing has quite shaken that myth as the way these two countries have handled coronavirus or failed to handle it. A shattering reminder of that failure came in Britain this week when the death toll passed 100,000 in a country of 65 million. Just about everything the government could have done wrong, it did. It was at this time last year that Britain reported 2 cases of COVID. Health Secretary Matt Hancock said there's nothing to worry about. The National Health Service has this well under control. It is well prepared, he said, because Britain has developed a world-leading testing system. The risk was raised from very low to low. But it wasn't a long time from the end of January to the beginning of March, by which time the story had changed tragically. The numbers were still not showing what people were suffering. On the 2nd of March, 40 cases were reported. 2 weeks later, that number rose, the official number that is, to 616. But hundreds and then thousands had begun to die. From about the 10th of March, demands had been rising for a national lockdown in line with what other countries were doing. That came only on the 23rd of March after thousands had died needlessly. Then Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced that Britain is introducing a world-beating test and trace system. Within weeks, the government was acknowledging officially that that was not working. Over the summer, numbers did begin to come down. The lockdown certainly had some effect, and that's when the government introduced its Eat Out to Help Out scheme, under which it encouraged and invited and in fact paid for people to go out and therefore mix and mingle at restaurants. The government paid restaurants £1.5 billion to feed people at half price up to a limit. It was soon after that that the numbers began to rise again. The numbers began to rise significantly in September and then more so in October. Again, demands arose from independent scientists for a lockdown to arrest this rise. The government responded by tiered and restricted regional limitations that were extended one after another rather than a firm lockdown. That did come later in October, but that was again too late to halt these numbers, and the lockdown itself was of a rather limited nature. At the beginning of last month, of course, cases had begun to skyrocket, fed by the new variant of the virus, now notorious as the UK variant. In the middle of December, the Health Secretary was saying, the Mayor of London was saying that the situation is out of control, and this is their expression to describe the situation. And yet it is only on the 4th of January that the Prime Minister ordered a lockdown, the 3rd. In the intervening period, advanced tier restrictions were introduced in one area after another, and there were regional variations. The move was to take this step by step in limited ways. It never was going to be enough. On Christmas Day, in many areas, people were allowed to travel and mix and mingle, and the cases since then have been going through the roof. This 3rd lockdown will now be in force until at least the middle of February and very likely for a period beyond. We've been told schools will not reopen until at least March the 8th, and very likely that could be delayed further. The government is at last being careful, but 100,000 deaths later, many of which could have been avoided by timely government action. This is a legacy Boris Johnson will never be able to shake off.
I mourn every death in this pandemic, and we share the grief of all those who have been bereaved, Mr. Speaker. And let the House be in no doubt that I and the government take full responsibility for all the actions we've taken during this pandemic to fight this disease. And yes, Mr. Speaker, there will indeed be a time when we must learn the lessons of what has happened, reflect on them, and prepare.
What the British government has got right is the procurement and the speed of the vaccination. It pre-ordered vaccines from a number of supplies and a number of institutions. That is about 350 million doses pre-ordered before the vaccination could begin, and that is now continuing at pace at a rate of about 200 inoculations a minute on average. It is now hoped that the vaccines will do their job and that the government will do a better job now at easing restrictions and still enforcing controls where they need to be, following and through the vaccination drive.